Hi everyone, welcome back to JD Does Dev. I'm JD, and this is part 3 of our Doxel training. Today we're going to be talking about Doxel Stacks. In Doxel, the concept of a stack is a collection of configuration or services put together to create a reusable application. They are built in YAML files, .yml, and stored within the Doxel folder at your home folder or tilde.doxel/stacks. A stack YAML file is the equivalent to a Docker Compose file in that it defines services to be used for an application. Now, let's go to our editors and take a look at the default stack. So I'm in VS Code, my IDE of choice, and I'm in the Doxel folder. Now, looking through it, we've got a couple things, but right now we're going to concentrate on stacks. I'm going to open up the default stack.yaml or stack-default.yaml, and we'll take a look. Our basic LAMP stack, which is Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, comes with Apache 2.4, MySQL 5.6, PHP 7.2. And if we look through, we've got our services here, which are web, DB, and CLI. Now, each of these uses a different stack file. Now, if we look at our services here, we've got web, DB, and CLI. Each of these extends out from a service in our services file, which is Doxel Stacks services.yaml. This one extends out Apache, this one extends out MySQL, and this one extends out CLI. One thing to notice is that there isn't a lot going on here. In fact, it seems oddly simple for something so powerful. Now let's dive into how Docker and Doxel take this file and convert it into a full application. Now let's look at what comes before the services. Now in this section here, the important thing is version 2.1. This tells Docker which Docker Compose API we're running against, so even if your Docker is upgraded, our application isn't going to break. Take note of the version here when defining your own services. Some commands may not be available in the version we're using for Doxel. Now let's look at the web service in the default stack. All right, first off, the web service is where our web server lives. In this stack, we're using Apache. All web requests are sent through this service, and all rendering happens here as well. Now, let's look at this in chunks, okay? We've got web. That is the name of our service. This could literally be anything, but it makes sense to name it descriptively. Now, in this section, we are telling Docker Compose where to find the actual configuration. Doxel places all of the common services inside a file at your home folder, Doxel Stacks services YAML. Each of those services are named and available to be used by other files. As you can see here, we're taking the service Apache from that YAML file and loading it into our application. Now in this chunk, depends on, we're making sure that the CLI service is started before this one. This is because our web service needs the CLI service to be running so that it can function properly. Now let's go into the services file and take a look and see what's in the Apache service. So we'll open up services.yaml, and it's right here on top. Now if you look, you can see there is a lot more going on here than just our default stack web service. We've got our host name, web. Now this could be, again, it could be anything, but it makes sense to make it more descriptive. And then we've got our image here. Now, if you take note, you'll see that there is some bash scripting happening here. Now, basically, this is saying if there is a web image environmental variable, use that. If not, then we're going to use this image, Doxel Apache 2423. We'll talk more about configuring environmental variables in an upcoming section, but it's a very, very powerful aspect of Doxel. Now, this line altogether is the equivalent of our docker run command, which would be, if you look down here in the terminal, docker run name Apache, hostname web Doxel 2.3. So this command is being run by our YAML file right here. Up next, we've got our volumes. Now this is our project root volume. And even though it says volumes, don't be fooled. This is actually a bind mount that's going from the project root volume to the folder var www within the container. We're also telling Docker that it's read-only, means we're not going to change it, and that there's no reason to copy anything into the container. Instead, we're just going to create pointers to the files. Now, here we're using something called named volumes, which makes it easier to configure the bind mount, as well as inspect the bind mount from the command line. Now, let's look at our labels. Labels are specific to Compose projects. These are key value pairs that are used for orchestration of the application services. For example, the first line here, io.doxel virtual host equals, etc. This is used to create a label that Doxel uses to tell the web service which domain it should be listening for while it's running. Now, when we get down into the environment section here, we can set the environment variables elsewhere, as part of the host machine's environment, or in this section. As you can see, the Apache document root is being passed as part of this section. We're seeing var www, either the doc root variable, or we're just going to say doc root. But the basic auth user and basic auth pass, these are coming from the host machine. We're just saying pass the host machine's variable into this. And then finally, we've got the DNS and the logging. Now, the DNS is telling the web service what DNS service to use. Now, these variables are set at runtime. And logging just does exactly what it says. Our max size and max file for logging options, we set those as well. Now, as you can see from these files that we've looked at, Doxel Stacks make it extremely easy to get working with minimal, even zero configuration. With the default stacks that are packaged with Doxel, we can have a robust development environment running without having to worry about setting up PHP, Apache, MySQL, or others. Simply start Doxel in your project and begin developing. In our next section, we're going to be learning about the services that make Doxel. Well, that's going to do it for this video. I'm JD, and this has been JD Does Dev. Thanks for watching. And don't forget to click those little like and subscribe buttons at the bottom, and if there's something else that you'd like to learn about or like me to cover, feel free to leave a comment. Thanks, and I'll see you on the next one.